Hey guys, this is Randy with Saturday Station Farm. So we're gonna go into the pig's hoop house, take a look at some of this deep bedding that we've got going on. Now you can see, looking around, Nick's been out here working quite a bit. The base of our foundation is a 6x6 timber, and the pigs have really dug that out quite a bit. So then we've gone ahead and added in well over 6 inches. We're probably up around like 10 to 12 inches of wood chips in some of these spots, where it's built right up and it's going to become this huge mat of just real fibrous, coarse, really tough to break down carbon material, right? Wood chips and wood in general has a very complex structure as opposed to grasses and leaves and other more delicate or simple structured plants. So I love the wood chips. One, you can get them a super huge volume, usually next to nothing, and they spread easy. If there's any urine inside here, because especially in our alleyway, there's going to be a lot of piglets running around through here. There's sows will be coming through here. There's going to be some bathroom action happening here. So with the big coarse stuff, urine can percolate down through it, and air can get down inside it. And now on top of this, as they start going to the bathroom, we'll start layering on probably straw, most likely. Maybe some hay if we're giving it to them, to give them as a snack. Maybe even more wood chips. The chickens will be in here scratching it. The pigs will be turning it over. I might sprinkle a little bit of corn or some other snack, or some rye or some seeds, just to give them something to kind of root around for a little bit. Not as a major food source, just as a toy, something to just kind of turn it over. So the great thing about having deep bedding is that you still maintain a little bit of the warmth of the earth. And with that extra, like these extra foot, 2 foot, 3 feet of wood chips and organic matter that we have breaking down, that creates heat. So up here in our winter northern climate of Maine, it gets pretty chilly. So having that little bit of extra heat, even if it's not actively composting and breaking down, it acts as an insulation barrier, and the pigs can burrow down through it, and they get down to the soil where it's actually warmer. Obviously under cover. If this were outside, the frost would hit it and the frost would pull down through it. But the frost inside the hoop house here, even with practically open ends, it just never penetrates. A large part of that is the overhead cover. It heats up, and then there's such a volume of wood chips and activity and that composting action of the wood chips, our carbon source, and our manure, our nitrogen source, working together and being broken down. And of course that composting action gives off heat. And it gives it, if not enough residual heat to really warm the place up, it's enough to keep things from freezing anyway. As the volume increases, the overall volume of organic matter, manure, wood chips, carbon sources, it can heat up quite a bit, and also the composting action accelerates as well. It's exponential. Like those little microorganisms get busy and they start taking off, and they just take off, and it's faster and faster and faster. And eventually what we're going to get wound up with is some super black earth. Now, even if you did the same thing, clean out your chicken coop once a year, clean out your pig's quarters once a year, what have you, you're gonna want to designate a spot someplace where you can set it. And if you're kind of like me and kind of lazy at times, I like to set all my stuff and basically cold composting. And it'll probably get like a dry crust on the outside of it, but on the interior it's going to continually break down over time, and you're going to be left eventually with just a black, rich earth. So you can see here, this is one of our compost piles. You can see behind me. And you get this top here that just gets this real kind of dry, it gets this real dry layer to it. But then as you come down deeper, you can see there's still a lot of undigested wood chips in there, but it's turned into earth, right? It's just turned into pure earth. And you smell it, and if you smell it, it should smell just like earth, like rich, earthy smell to it. No, nothing rotten, no off smells, any of that kind of stuff. Smell like pleasant earth, And we've had raccoons and old carcasses in here, manure. Anytime you have a nitrogen source, it's gonna start breaking down. And that nitrogen source can be a dead animal carcass. It can be manure. It could be old vegetable matter, you know, any of that stuff like in your kitchen. If you have like a little compost bin and you don't take it out soon enough and it starts turning on you, that rot that's happening. Well, you can counteract that by adding carbon to that volume of nitrogen, you know, your rotting stuff. And that carbon's gonna capture all that stuff you're smelling. That's ammonia, or it's just other noxious gases that are being volatilized to the atmosphere. So you're basically using carbon to capture it, and it gets bound up in a stable matrix in the soil and combines to become soil particles. And all those nutrients that are bound in your nitrogen source and in the carbon sources get basically recycled into compost that can go back to your soil and start this whole process over again. And so that's our goal. Instead of having to muck out shelters constantly every day, we will mitigate cleanliness and odors with the application of a carbon material. Usually wood chips, because we have a lot of them. This time of year it's fall, so we'll use a lot of leaves when they're available. 100%. You could use straw, hay will kind of work, shredded paper. Some of those have their pluses and minuses, but wood chips tend to be a really great one. A lot of towns and municipalities, they're kind of a waste form, especially if they're doing a lot of tree trimming around your property and around your towns. Sometimes they blow those wood chips off into the culverts and the ditches, but if you're like in a residential area, you know, they have to blow them in the back of a truck and then go dump them someplace. So for a lot of foresters, that represents a waste product they need to get rid of. So bringing them out onto the farm, for us, that's a incoming energy reserves that we can bring as inputs into our farm. Because, you know, obviously as the pigs consume plants and minerals from our soil and they leave the farm in the form of products, that's energy leaving our farm. So we bring inputs in the form of feed, wood chips, old apples, you know, whatever we can for inputs to have a more net positive gain than we are a net negative, right? We want to be building soils, not decreasing them over time. And the chickens are tearing this all up. They just started scratching a little bit and you can see just how dark it really is. There's a lot of decomposed stuff in there, but look. There's a bunch of sticks. Those will break down over time. I mean, don't worry. Also, when it comes to composting, if you do have a pile and you're curious if it's actually cooking at the right temperature, you can pick up a compost thermometer. They're like 2 to 3 feet long, and they're designed just for compost piles. Mostly because the markings on them have little gradations like, oh, you're in the good zone, you're in the cold zone, you're in the hot zone. And it, of course, has the regular temperature. So it'll measure anything, but it's a real quick, easy way to stick in your compost pile, forget all about it, and you can just monitor really, really easily. So that's another great option. I'll have a link down below where you can check them out, pick one up if you need. I've had one for a super long time and it works really well. One of the keys about having a farm with livestock is manure management. You know, whether you have just a few chickens or you have a couple pigs or a lot of chickens or ducks, you know, manure management is a big part of that. And so one of the easiest ways to manage is to look into like a deep bedding, deep composting, or long, you know, slow, cold composting. But having a volume of carbon material that you can help to offset all that manure. You know, the animals are basically doing what a compost pile does, but in 24 hours. I love wood chips. They work super awesome on the farm. They were excellent for deep bedding. When it comes to composting, you could turn the pile constantly. You know, a general rule of thumb is 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet. That cubicle volume is generally considered pretty ideal. Much bigger, and it can get too hot in the very center and kill little microbes. Too little, and it doesn't heat up enough to kill all the potentially harmful pathogens. The flip side of that is having it compost longer, right? You can either have it really intensive, turn it all the time so you're always interjecting oxygen into the pile to help the breakdown and the whole process, the decomposition process, or you can kind of set it and forget it and leave it for a long period of time. You know, there's like a time temperature variable going on. And I tend to just let it sit for a while. I might even let a pile sit for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Just, and I'll start piles elsewhere. If we were growing more veggies and we had an absolute super need for it right off the bat, I may be a little more apt to rotate. But whereas most of it's gonna go around a lot of our perennials and that kind of stuff, I don't mind just having separate piles and then just leaving them alone and just remember, which ones are which, and just letting them decompose at their own rate over seasons, and then coming around at a later date and collecting it. So if you're gonna go that route, you may need some space. You may have to consider that in your layout, but otherwise, it's way less work, and for our needs, works perfect. So I'm a huge fan of wood chips. If you've got a farm and you've got livestock, start thinking about how you're going to offset your manure management, or just how you're gonna manage your manure. Whether you're gonna be shoveling it and raking it out and putting it in a pile someplace, you're still probably gonna want some carbon source to capture that nitrogen that's in that soil that's giving it off bad odors and bad smells. Or look at doing like a deep bedding method, which again, you're probably gonna need some big carbon source. If not, you're probably gonna have a pretty stinky farm and no one's gonna wanna go there. So use your nose. That's your first line of defense in managing your manure on your farm. So hope this helps. Let me know what you guys are using down below. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.